Alright, so this is part 2 to the video I made titled How a Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG Reboot Could Save the Game. There was love, there was hate, there were fights, there was forgiveness. Even legends came to life. This is a video that I made last Saturday, so technically it's been 3 days. YouTube is saying it's only been 2, but it's the 3rd day. I think it's been enough time to where we can start addressing some of the comments, and I think there's an interesting conversation here. And what's also interesting about the comment section of this video is that there are very few like one-liner comments. There's very few like good video, or I like your idea, or I dislike your idea, or I hate you. There's very few of that. Much like another video that I made back in the day, the vast majority of comments, like 99% of comments, are like entire paragraphs, like several paragraphs in one comment. So you can tell just by looking at the comment section that there's a lot of passion around this conversation, and I did my best to honor that passion by answering almost every single one of the comments. I don't answer all of them because some of them are not really directed to me. I don't really feel like there's a point in me, they're rhetorical. There's no reason for me to respond. Others are just straight up insulting me, which some of them I don't answer, some of them I do. Other ones, a lot of them are just people saying, hey, this idea is great. I like your video for this and this reason, so I'll just like it, but I won't comment back. Some of these comments are also from people who straight up didn't watch the video altogether, or people that only watched half of it and brought things up that I addressed later on the video. So I didn't bother responding to every single comment because there's a point where I'm just copy-pasting my same answer. I'm copy-pasting like timestamps where, hey, I addressed this. But some of the comments that came up kind of showed that there was room for me to have expanded even more. A lot of times people complain that my videos are too long, and then when I try to make a shorter video, it's all these comments saying that I didn't talk about this or I missed this or that. And the truth is that I was just trying to be a little bit more objective and straight to the point as opposed to like hour-long videos, which is normally what I do. My videos are normally very long and I ramble a lot. But I think it goes to show that there was still room to have expanded a little more on the conversation, and some of these comments warrant very long responses that honestly I acknowledged, but there's a lot more to be said and the conversation is a lot more deep than you can have in just a comment section of a video. So I thought it would be interesting to do a part 2 and actually address some of these, more interesting comments that warrant a more in-depth conversation, right? So I chose a few of them that I thought were interesting, or at least, could spark an interesting conversation, or, I felt like I need to address them for whatever reason. And with all of that said, let's get into part 2 of the video, which again, if you haven't watched part 1, you might want to do that first and come back. Alright, so here's the first bulk of interesting comments that I saw. First one here says, if the game is getting rebooted, I'd like to see ritual monsters in the extra deck, personally. It removes a lot of the problems they have if you only need the spell card and the sacrifice, much the way fusions work. An archetype being a word in its own box next to the card name so that there's no confusing which cards are and are not part of the archetype. And reprinting older cards with that little box if they become part of the archetype later. So the first sentence here, an idea that was brought up about ritual monsters going to the extra deck, was brought up a lot. A lot of people sharing this opinion. I personally think that this is a great idea. A few people brought this up and honestly it just makes sense. A big problem that old ritual cards have is that they're very hard to pull off, right? They almost don't make sense to use. They're so difficult to use that why even bother? Even though it does go against what I originally proposed, I feel like it does make sense, but here's my thought on that. The first school of thought is this person's idea, right? It fixes a long-time problem that the game has had with rituals. The other school of thought, which is more in line with what I suggested on the video, is not touching the rules whatsoever. And I do believe that this problem can also be addressed simply by reworking the cards without ever having to touch the rules of the game whatsoever, which is a really big thing for me. My other concern, other than generally changing the rules of the game, which is not something I want to do, is that by adding the ritual cards to the extra deck, that might cause the game to speed up, which is exactly what a lot of the video is trying to address. Now, that might not be the worst thing. It might speed up the game a little bit, but maybe it's not that big of a problem, right? Maybe it still makes more sense to do exactly that. But here's the reason why I'm hesitant. This is what my philosophy is. I believe that anything that touches the rules of the game whatsoever, in part, hinders the whole reason why I think a reboot could be beneficial. The reason with being so extreme about not touching the rules of the game whatsoever, in part, is exactly that. It's to make it as reapproachable as possible for returning players. And this is not just for returning players, it's for current players as well. I'll use 2 of my best friends as an example, both people who still play the current game. I'll also bring into this example rush duels, which is something that comes up constantly. And later on in the video, I'm gonna properly address rush duels because again, it comes up constantly every single video that I make, but I'll use it in this example as well. So to the first friend that I'm referencing here, right? He is a longtime childhood friend of mine. We grew up playing Yu-Gi-Oh together. We basically started playing around the same age type of thing. He quit playing the game around the Edison era, and it's not because he didn't like the game anymore, it's not because he didn't like synchros or whatever. The real reason why he quit the game was mostly financial. It was because, now he couldn't compete against other people with his deck anymore. He got outclassed. And even against us, just playing with friends, he couldn't play with us anymore because all of us were rocking synchro decks and he felt like he really didn't have a chance. He assumed that every so often he was going to have to spend a bunch of money and buy a new set, buy a new deck, and financially to him it just didn't make sense at that point. He bought into this idea that Yu-Gi-Oh still tries to sell till this day of this eternal format, where if you buy a set of cards now, if you invest your money and make a good deck, you'll always be able to use it type of thing. And the reality is that that's just not the case. It's never been the case and it will never be the case. But because Yu-Gi-Oh is one of those few games that doesn't have a rotation system, to a lot of people that's appealing. Like whatever you buy, you'll always be able to play with that is the idea. And as soon as he realized that within a matter of like 1 or 2 years, he's constantly updating his deck and it's getting expensive, and now this whole new set of cards has come out where he can't even fine-tune his deck anymore. It's obsolete. That right there killed Yu-Gi-Oh for him. He never stopped liking the game though, and with Master Duel coming out, we finally convinced him to get back into the game. He actually got back into it beginning of last year. The fact that you already start the game with a bunch of gems, you can grind for more, you can basically make any deck that you want right off the bat, super appealing to him. Unlike me, who's married to the original IP, he actually liked a lot of these changes and he was open to learning the new game. He liked the way the cards looked. He learned a new game, me and my other friend taught him how to play it, he got into it, and he played it for about 1 month and never touched it again. I've never seen him touch it ever again. And I've talked to him about it. Why did that happen exactly? Is it a nostalgia thing? Do you miss the Duel Monsters or the GX era? What exactly happened there that you don't play the game? Because you got pretty into it. You learned it. It's because of the way that the game plays now. It wasn't even a challenge for, he's a really smart guy. It wasn't a challenge for him to learn the new game. There was no financial barrier at this point. It was literally because he doesn't like the way that the current game plays. He doesn't like the pace, Omni negates, all these like 20-step combos. It's not even a nostalgia thing. He just came back to a game that he didn't recognize. Even in his very rare case of people that like the new thing and want to get into it, want to learn and are excited about it, he only lasts a few weeks. It wasn't because he didn't get how the new game works. He's a very smart guy, way smarter than me. He understood it pretty quick. It wasn't because of some nostalgia from like the Duel Monsters or the GX era that was holding him back. He actually really liked the way the new game looks. Why do I use him as the first example? Why do I say this? Because my number one reason with not wanting to change the rules of the game is the fact that I acknowledge that the game used to be very good. It's not just about some sort of Yu-Gi Boomer nostalgia with the original IP, right? Missing the Duel Monsters era, because in his case, it wasn't even that. He has no real passion, I guess, or nostalgia for the Duel Monsters era. He actually preferred the new stuff, so he's even in that category. But I truly believe and acknowledge that the success that Yu-Gi-Oh used to have wasn't just because of the IP. It wasn't just because of the anime. It was the way the game played as well. I could sit here and think of probably 50 to 100 different things that I would change about the game to quote-unquote make it better. But I try to stay very humble about the fact that I'm not Kazuki. I didn't create one of the best-selling trading card games of all time. There's a reason why the game's successful. And I wasn't the creator of that game. That doesn't mean that me or this person or everybody else can't come up with good ideas to improve the game. That's not what I'm saying. While I do believe that nothing in this world is perfect and everything has room for improvement, I do strongly believe that the game used to be popular for a reason. The game had some sort of secret sauce back in the day that I try to acknowledge that maybe I don't even understand all of it, right? Maybe I don't entirely understand the reason why that was the case. That is one of the reasons why I don't want to change the game. That's one of the reasons why I don't want to put like my own twist on it, because I'm not Kazuki. I'm not the one that made the hit of the game that this is. So I try my best to be humble about the fact that the game used to be very popular for a reason, and it's not as popular now for another reason. Whatever it is that we had going on back then, even if it's one or a few elements, maybe not everything, but there's certainly a few elements of whatever we had going on back there is what made the game popular. And although I am proposing with this reboot reworking most of the original cards, like the vast majority of it, I am proposing modernizing them a little bit, making the game, a little more modern compared to what it used to be. But there is a big part of me also that feels that I'm not Kazuki. I'm not the one that made this successful game. Like, it was successful and I'm not the one that made it. So maybe I shouldn't go changing the rules. Maybe the fundamental rules of how the game works are a big reason why it was successful, and that's why I don't want to touch it. it because there's some sort of secret sauce there that I don't understand probably. That's not me dogging on the person that made this comment. In fact, I do tend to like their idea a lot. That's not saying that, the game can't be improved. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I'm hesitant to change the rules for that reason. Now using my second example, my very best friend who is an avid enjoyer of the current modern Yu-Gi-Oh game. Granted, even in his case, he took a break when Snake Eye came out and has never played the game since. But if you were to ask him if he still likes the modern game, he's gonna tell you yes, he just took a break, but he still likes the current game, right? I tried to get him into Rush Duels, and I wasn't able to. I showed him the game, I showed him the cards, instant nostalgia injection, recognizes all of the cards, looks really cool, wants to get into it. Doesn't like the game, doesn't stick around, why? I quote, because this is not Yu-Gi-Oh! It changes the rules. It's a fun little game, but this is not my Yu-Gi-Oh! I don't want to play this. Okay, can we play Edison or Goat? Do you want to play that with me? Sure. We've been playing a ton of Edison. Loves it. We've been playing a lot of Goat. Loves it. We now play both of those formats all the time, right? And this is coming from somebody that really likes the modern game, but also really likes Goat and Edison, but doesn't like Rush Duels. Why? There's nothing wrong with Rush Duels. Hell, I like Rush Duels. I was playing Rush Duels just yesterday. I made a new Cyber Dragon deck. I was having fun. I like Rush Duels. I don't have a problem with it. But it's not real Yu-Gi-Oh! Even if it uses similar rules, even if the game is honestly fun, even if it uses the same IP, it is technically not the same game, and that turns a lot of people off. Some people like it, and that's fine. Rush Duels has actually grown on me even. I like Rush Duels. I've been playing it a little more, and I'm having fun. I don't hate Rush Duels. But it doesn't come anywhere near to the original game, and a lot of current players and returning players probably feel the same way. You have no idea how often Rush Duels comes up. Every time I say anything about the modern game, anytime I criticize it or I talk about a reboot, there's always people talking about, hey, play Rush Duels. Hey, if you don't like the modern game, play Rush Duels. Hey, if you want a reboot, that's a dumb idea because they already did Rush Duels and that didn't work very well. Go play that. That is why I don't consider Rush Duels a good reboot, and that is also why, to this comment finally coming full circle, why I don't want to change the rules. Even though I have to agree with this person, this idea sounds good because a big thing for me is as little deck search as possible. I don't like deck search. I don't think it's a good thing to have a lot of it. So trust me, for me to be proposing something that adds deck search to the game in general, I'm usually not going to like it. But even me being in this position, I would prefer reworking the ritual card itself and how it deck searches for the actual monster than actually changing the fundamental rules of the game. That's why, and you don't have to agree with me. You don't have to see things exactly the way I see. I'm not like the holder of truth, and this is not like a business pitch to Konami or anything, because a lot of people are acting like this is a business proposition I'm making to Konami. It's not. All this is just my ideas and thoughts. That's all it is. That's the extent of it, and no one has to agree, but this is why I feel the way that I do. Even if you don't agree, that's why. Alright, let's move on to the next comment, and I'm so sorry for spending so much time on this one comment. This poor person probably feels like I completely singled them out for no reason. All of this wasn't just for this one comment for this poor person that just actually gives a pretty good idea. Like, it's not me dogging on this one person. I'm addressing like 50 comments at once and just using this as a vehicle. Next comment here, which I believe this is the most upvoted comment of the entire video, is somebody disagreeing with me. Man, I don't want a reboot. I just don't want decks to cost more than 4 months worth of groceries. Honestly, as far as the cost of the game, I think that everybody, myself included, unanimously agrees that the game is way too expensive. I think that whether you liked my idea or you didn't like it, you agree, don't agree, or you're in between, you probably agree that the game is too expensive. And it's also a pretty funny comment because if you put it into perspective, yeah, keeping up with this game is probably more expensive than groceries. It's freaking crazy. Next comment. Yu-Gi-Oh! Had certain design concepts they partly adhered to in the beginning. Normal monsters, high attack and defense, effect monsters, low attack and defense, but supporting effect, or high attack defense, but determining, So it doesn't let me read the rest of the comment. I don't know what happened here. When this comment was originally made, I could read the whole thing, and clearly other people could as well, and I even left, a response there. So I don't know what happened when I refreshed the video, it didn't let me load the rest of it. From what I remember, this person is basically saying that the game has deviated from the original premise and original concepts and things that made it make sense before, and now it's just a little too crazy type of thing. Next comment, LOL, no shit, I'm a 40-year-old electrician actually. That's funny. During COVID, me and my friends decided to do some video duels from our homes since there was nothing to do. Everything was new, I heard about synchros and XYZs, but never played with them, let alone links and pendulums. Same issue happened to this person's comment, but this one I remembered because I thought it was very funny the fact that I use all the time the example of like the 8-year-old Timmys and the 40-year-old electrician Toms. This guy is actually a 40-year-old electrician. One of the actual legends and memes of the channel has come to life. So what he's basically saying, from what I remember, is that he used to play the game back in the day, and recently he tried to get back into it with his friends, and it was just completely unapproachable and unrecognizable. They couldn't get into it type of thing. He is one of the exact types of returning players that I'm talking about. Like a lot of these people that used to play Yu-Gi-Oh when they were young adults or kids or teenagers that try to get back into Yu-Gi-Oh get completely intimidated and turned off by the current game. In the Yu-Gi-Oh community, I feel like we like to act like this person doesn't exist. Like if the game got rebooted or if it was more recognizable, these people would never come back to the game. They're over it, right? They don't really exist. The truth is that the vast majority of people that are part of this demographic, they're not part of the conversation because they've either moved on and they try to come back and it's not what they remember, or they get bullied out. If this guy were to pop up on Reddit or on any forum discussing Yu-Gi-Oh! And he gave his opinion and how he tried to get back into the game and he wasn't able to because it's unrecognizable, you and me and everybody knows he would get bullied. He would be called a Yugi boomer, everybody would call him stupid for not being able to learn the new game, and he would just get shunned out of the conversation. Which is what I believe is happening. The vast majority of people who don't love the current game just get bullied out of the conversation. So here's the next comment that has a lot of upvotes. This is an impossible idea. Making a new format that runs parallel to the original game is a possibility, but replacing the game and telling the community who's used to an eternal format that starting now all their cards are useless and they have to start from scratch is ludicrous. That's not what I said. That's not what I said at all. Is there any point of the video where I said that the current format for Yu-Gi-Oh, the current way you play Yu-Gi-Oh will become illegal if this were to happen? Which it's not going to, and I'm not saying that this person is saying this, but man, so many people are acting like Konami gives a shit about what I think about the game, and like this is some sort of business proposition. It's not. But addressing this comment specifically, and I did comment this to him, at no point did I say that, you know, it makes the current game illegal. I'm not the police. Yes, the intention of the reboot would be to replace the current format as the new main format, but it doesn't make the game illegal. You can still play it. Oh, the community that's been used to an eternal format and all of their cards are now useless. They've been useless. Dude, have you tried playing with X-Sabers in 2024? Have you tried, I don't know, playing with the Blue Eyes? Granted, the Blue Eyes and the Six Samurai got some support, so maybe those are more viable. But generally speaking, man, all your cards are just 1 or 2 sets away from becoming irrelevant forever. And then maybe in a decade, if you're lucky, Konami will grab a shovel and dig up from the grave your favorite archetype and give it a little bit of support, and it might be viable and relevant for the next 2 months. And then once the new sets come out, guess what? Your favorite archetype is back into the grave. How long do you think I've been waiting for X-Saber support? How long do you think I've been waiting for that? X-Sabers are my favorite archetype. I used to play them back in 2010. It's been 14 years that I've been waiting for support. It's not gonna happen. And even if it does, it's gonna be relevant for 1 or 2 months and then it's gone. There's no eternal format. This is an illusion. Oh, so what you're saying is if you had it your way and you had this reboot, everybody's deck, everybody's cards will now become irrelevant. They already are irrelevant. If they're not irrelevant now, they're going to be irrelevant in another 2 months. That's already the way it works. And I'm not saying that you can't continue playing that game. Just like we have Goat and Edison, you can still have that format and play the game the way you love. Nobody's making it illegal. Again, I'm not the police. But there's just this illusion that Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't have rotation and it has an eternal format. It doesn't, man. It has a rotation through banlists and through new Tier 0 sets that come out. It's the worst type of rotation. I don't like that this is the case. If I had it my way, it would be awesome if we expanded horizontally and they did in fact honor what they're trying to do. Which is the idea that every deck that you make, every archetype that you buy, every set or collection that you have, that it's always going to be relevant in some way with maybe some fine-tuning. I would love for it to be that way. I'd still be playing X-Sabers. Unfortunately, I live in reality, and that is not the reality. There is no eternal format. I don't play Yu-Gi-Oh! I played when I was a kid and a teenager, but stopped around the introduction of synchros. I'm probably the exact audience that you're referring to. Yes, I'm telling you, there are more of these people out there than we think there are. I agree partially with your sentiment, but I think the best option would be for Yu-Gi-Oh! To have a standard format that works the way that you're saying, and it rotates so the power levels can be controlled, but also keep the legacy format format so all the players who are super invested in current Yu-Gi-Oh! Don't lose everything. I hear you and I completely agree with you. I've been saying that on almost all my videos that Yu-Gi-Oh! Needs rotation. I'm constantly saying that on the comments. Like, one of the main things I think is the problem with the game is a lack of rotation. I've been saying that, and of course it's no problem. This person is not like an active viewer of the channel, so they wouldn't know if I don't bring it up specifically on this video. Which is why I feel like my videos tend to get a little bit long, is because I try to always cover all my bases, and it seems that as soon as when I make a video that I'm not mentioning every little thing that I think, people like assume that I think something else. I don't know. And this is obviously not directed to this one comment and this one person, because they happen to agree with me and I happen to agree with what they're proposing as well. It's just that I didn't bring it up on this one video. I think that some sort of rotation for a game like this is just inevitable. I don't like spending money either, man, but I think it's important. And frankly, if you're invested in this game, if you compete, you're already spending a bunch of money. You went from tier laments to Kashtira to Snake Eye to Fiendsmith to whatever, like you're also constantly spending money. So they do agree with me. For that reason, I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this comment because it's just two people agreeing, right? They do feel though that there are some minor rules that could be adjusted to improve the game type of thing. Generally speaking, from the end of the comment there, they too would like to see fewer floodgates, less hyper consistency, less probably a lot of everything. I can't read the rest, but probably everything that everybody knows sucks. They do feel though that a reboot is also a chance to reevaluate some of the rules, which is fine. A lot of people in the comments feel this way. They agree with me, but they would like to change some of the rules. That's fine. I'm not going to go over this one again because I did it right at the beginning of the video. You already know how I feel. I don't disagree. I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea, but I am very firm on not changing the rules. That doesn't mean that I wouldn't play a game that changes the rules slightly. Again, I do like rush duels and the changes are not slight, they're pretty big, and I still like the game. That's not to say I wouldn't play it. I wouldn't change the rules of the game for those reasons that I already discussed. That doesn't mean that some of these ideas are not good. That doesn't mean that I don't have 50 ideas of my own that I think are better than the current game. I talked on this channel about the fact that I came up with a TCG myself many years ago, so trust me, I do have a lot of ideas also to quote-unquote improve the game. It's just that my personal idea for a reboot follows very specific tenets type of thing. I even say on the video, my favorite era of the game is the 5Ds era. I love synchros. The name of the channel is Uruz because Xaber Uruz is my favorite card from that era, right? But it's also what I said on the video. The idea for me of a reboot, it's not about what I like or what I don't like. It's what I think is going to be the most beneficial for the game. I'm not looking at it from a perspective of like what I want to change, what I don't want to change, what I think is cool, what I don't think is cool. I'm just purely looking at it from a results and goals perspective. What would be the reboot that would bring back the most amount of returning players and that would bring back the most new players and would keep the most current players? That is the goal, regardless of what I like and what I don't like. You might disagree that this is the most efficient or best way to achieve this, and that's fine, but that's kind of what I mean. That's my goal. And in order to achieve that goal, and again, I could be wrong, I'm not the holder of the truth, but in order, in my view, to achieve that goal, there's a few very specific things that the reboot would have to follow, you know what I mean? Anyway, next comment. I don't think you're wrong, I just don't think it's practical or realistic. That's fine, there's nothing wrong with this comment. They even say that, you know, they don't think that I'm wrong, but they don't elaborate, so there's not much to talk about. I mean, why isn't it practical? I mean, because we would have to print out new cards and give them new effects? That's gonna make Konami a ton of money. I'm sure they wouldn't care that it's not practical. Oh, it's not realistic. Why? Because we don't think that the majority of the current player base would migrate? I think they would. I think some wouldn't, but I think they would. But anyway, there's not enough here to talk about. Next comment, I think removing all of the additional summoning mechanics would alienate a huge portion of the player base. Pendulum and links I can understand not having. Synchros and XYZ can be balanced to fit into the remake of Yu-Gi-Oh! Having more balanced versions of XYZ and Synchro could add a lot of flavor that earlier eras were missing. That's fair, and I understand that, but again, you specifically here say that we can get rid of pendulums and links, just not synchros and XYZs, probably because that's what you like and that's what you don't like, and the reboot is not about that. Again, the whole idea with the reboot is not about what I like or what I don't like, it's about what will achieve the goals that I've mentioned earlier. Like I said on the video, synchros and XYZs, I don't really have a problem with them, but they're not recognizable for returning players. I also don't think they really fit the Duel Monsters aesthetic and the theme and the era and how the game used to work, especially synchros. And they also trivialized fusions and rituals. I think that they also escaped from the Duel Monsters theme. That's why they wouldn't be there. It's not that I don't think you or many other people don't have a point, and it's not like I don't like some of these ideas or that I hate anything that's not fusion or ritual. It's just that I made a very objective video, and you might not agree with the objective of the video, but that was the objective with my reboot, you know what I mean? If I was redesigning the game for me and just to my liking, trust me, a lot of the rules would be getting changed. I would definitely be keeping synchros in there. I'd get rid of everything else and keep synchros, but that's how I would do it. So trust me, I do agree with a lot of these opinions, I do share on some of these visions, and frankly, I would change a lot of things if it was for me only. My personal vision for how I would redesign the game and remake it to my liking is not my vision for a proper reboot that would accommodate the most people. It's not really about what I particularly want. And yes, some of those things I do want. I don't want to see Omni Negates anymore. I don't like turn 1 boards. I don't like unbreakable boards. I don't like 20-step combos. All of those things, yes, those are to my liking. I would like those to not be in the game. But the vast majority of people agree with me. That's why they're there, type of thing. And again, you don't have to agree that this is the best way to accomplish that goal or the best way to achieve that objective. That's fine. But that was the intention of my video. That's where I'm coming from with it. Because a lot of these comments are saying, man, you never got over the dual monsters era, you hate synchros, you hate everything. I don't. I love them. You didn't get the point of the video. I'm sorry for harping so much on this point again and again, but it's just that so many of the comments of this video and other videos that I've made are just calling me a Yugi boomer that's never gone past the Dual Monsters era, right? It's people saying that I never grew up, that I never moved on, that I've never played the modern game, that I don't understand how things work, and I played the modern game. The Dual Monsters era is not even my favorite phase of the game. My favorite format is Edison. The name of this channel isn't Yugi and the Dark Magician. The name of this channel is @Xsaberuruz for a reason, man. It's not because I'm a total boomer that never got over Duel Monsters. It's just that my personal observation is that the Duel Monsters era was the most iconic, and it continues to be the most iconic. So a lot of the things I say are kind of based on that. I'm saying and thinking about things always with the best interest of the game in mind. I'm not thinking about myself, and a lot of people seem to think that I'm doing like the ideal me game, and it's not. And I'm not perfect either. Again, I'm not the holder of truth. I might be wrong, but everything that I've ever said, it's, with the objective of helping the game. It's not like personal gain or what I want to see, is what I think could help. All right, let's move along here because the video's starting to get really, really long, but the truth is that the things that I've said are pretty much my answer to the vast majority of comments, so there's that. I think that for the next comments here, there's not going to be a whole lot to respond because I've basically already said it. The answer is going to be the same, but I'll still look over them. I like this idea, but even if they do reboot the game, wouldn't Power Creep turn it into the same thing a decade or two later? Yes, probably. That is, assuming that they wouldn't ruin the game again. The idea would be that number one, they hopefully learned something, right? I mean, let's try not to repeat the same mistakes of the past that led us to having to do a reboot. That would be the hope, number one. But number two, which is the more practical reason, even if Konami still sucks, which they inevitably will, the second reason is that it gives Konami an out. The problem is that, again, the game does not have rotation. So even if Konami now realizes, man, this has gone way too far, nobody's happy, we're losing players, we're not getting new players, we gotta do something. They can't now turn around and say, okay guys, everything that was allowed up until this point, it's no longer allowed. Like, we're gonna roll back the clock a little bit here. We're gonna dial it back a little bit. They can't do that. Sure, they might be able to rework the master rule or something, but they can't do anything too drastic because that's gonna make several decks unviable all of a sudden. It's gonna, their effects of their cards are suddenly not gonna be relevant or work or matter. I'm sure that Konami feels to some level that there's no way out. The only way is up, right? They can't now just decide that, you know what, Lynx was a mistake. You know what, Pendulums was a mistake. They can't undo it. The cat's already out of the bag. There's no rotation, so it is what it is now. We don't have a seasonal model. We can't roll anything back. Let's just keep making it crazier and crazier and creating answers to the own problems that we've created type of thing. Like if special summons are a problem, if negates are a problem, if, I don't know, Snake Eyes is a problem, let's create an answer to that problem that we've created type of thing. Maybe there's profit in that, in fact. Maybe that is per design. Maybe things are unfolding exactly the way they want it to unfold. Maybe this has been the plan all along type of thing. And I would get more into this as far as what I think is going to happen next, because I think that Yu-Gi-Oh has reached a plateau as far as power creep, which is an interesting conversation for another video. I'm not going to get too much into it right now because, again, that's a conversation that warrants a video of its own. Because if you think about it, where does a game go from here? Most games are decided already on turn one. You already have unbreakable boards. You already have 20-step combos. Pretty much, we're at the max for everything. Can the game get even crazier? Like, what's the next phase? The main thing that has been deciding games now for a while is card advantage, right? Who has more cards in their hands? Cards like Max C and other cards that, are self-engine starters, or they recycle a lot of things from the graveyard. They're, a way for you to not brick. They're a way for you to not run out of cards in your hand. And the whole reason behind negates, the whole thing behind unbreakable boards is making your opponent waste cards in their hand and negate them and them running out of cards and running out of options. So where do you go from here, right? I think that the natural progression of things, again, not what I want, but at least what I see happening, is that now along with a negate or along with everything you do, there will be additional card draw. So the game won't have traditional turns anymore. Like technically there probably will still be turns, but it won't feel that way. It will feel like you and your opponent are playing simultaneously, a lot how it already feels now. There's a funny term that's been used in Yu-Gi-Oh for a while now, and it's not so funny because it's true, where people will say it's not your main phase, it's our main phase. There are multiple examples of decks that work like this, but just off the top of my head, I can think of Labyrinth being a big one that works that way. More and more the game is moving towards this direction and idea that, you know, it's not so much about my or your turn, it's like it's a back and forth that happens within the same turn type of thing. This is an idea that's been pretty widely adopted by the community, and clearly Konami embodies it. It's the idea that, yeah, we no longer have back and forth anymore as far as your turn, my turn, but the back and forth doesn't happen anymore on your turn or my turn. It happens simultaneously on our turn, right? Which is already the case. It looks like they're really embracing this idea with more modern designs of cards. A common complaint about the game is that, yeah, there are a lot of turn 1 unbreakable boards. The game gets decided on turn 1, but technically you did have an opportunity to answer, and you did a lot. It's just that as you answered, I answered back, and then you answered and I answered. So there was back and forth, it's just that it happened within the same turn. So if I had to guess, and I'm going to move on from this now, is that the next leap is actually making it so every time a negate happens or every time you do something, you draw cards, so you always have a hand. So Yu-Gi-Oh will come to this point where everything happens on turn 1 or turn 2, and every time you negate, every time you summon, you're drawing a card, and your opponent is drawing a card, and it's constant like back and forth within the same turn. Anyway, moving on from my crazy conspiracy theories here, let's look at the next comment. This person's talking about their favorite formats. The next one, all those early cards from the first several years of the deserve more credit. Yep, that's what I'm kind of saying, giving them a purpose. I love the idea you're pitching and suggesting for another format in Yu-Gi-Oh! As well as comment section is part of the many reasons why this game is dying and the community is shunned. The biggest problem with the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community is that the majority are loudmouth and refuse to listen to new ideas. Yeah, I already went into this, we don't have to go again, but I agree with them. Like, community is insufferable. You say anything that's not the status quo, you get shunned. One of the many reasons why I don't play Yu-Gi-Oh! At card shops anymore. First of all, nobody's playing. Anywhere that I go to a card shop, it's either Magic, Flesh and Blood, or Warhammer. Those are the only things that I ever see anybody playing. The few card shops that I know, and I should say the one card shop that I know that's within a 1 hour radius where people do play Yu-Gi-Oh! I rarely go, and when I go, they usually play Edison. They're not playing the current game. And that community tends to be a little bit more chill. Like the alternative format community, those people tend to be a lot nicer, but you know, and I don't want to generalize and say that everybody that plays Yu-Gi-Oh! Is an asshole, but most people that play Yu-Gi-Oh! Are assholes, honestly. I was not at all bummed when Master Duel came out. I would not mind if the game went to being digital only. I don't really want to play with most people that are part of the community, honestly. This person's telling me that tuners and synchros have nothing to do with racing, but it is actually talking about the perpetual motion, as Kaiba made a perpetual motion machine for power generation. Gotcha, and you're probably right. I don't know the specifics of it. My whole point was just that, you know, 5Ds deviates a lot from the original occult and going to the shadow realm type of themes that the original game had, and it went into this like motorcycle racing thing. If the OG anime and the card game received a reboot, I would start paying attention to Yu-Gi-Oh! Again. I really tried some of the newer shows and they just weren't for me. And the chaotic nature of the card game these days is a major turnoff. You and me both, buddy. I still play it, but yeah, the anime especially. Anything after 5Ds, as far as anime, just sucks. Maybe I'm being unfair. There's going to be that one person, oh, Vrains was pretty good, or this, or Arc V, or Sevens is pretty good. That's fine. You can have your opinion, I can have mine. Everything post 5Ds sucked. So summarizing things here, I get the context of the comment. They're basically saying that, hey, Yu-Gi-Oh! Changed and it's not for me anymore. I don't like the modern animes. I've tried multiple of them. I've tried the current game. It sucks. I would like a reboot also. These people are out there. They're just probably usually not part of the mainstream conversation. Like if you haven't played Yu-Gi-Oh! In 10 years, you're probably not on our Yu-Gi-Oh! On Reddit having these conversations, right? Because you've moved on from the game. Even though you like it, you wish it would go back to what it was, you moved on. If I had to guess, and I don't know this for sure, this person, along with several others that popped up on the comment section, they found my videos through some sort of YouTube algorithm suggestion. Like, I highly doubt that they went searching for Yu-Gi-Oh content. Like, they went on the YouTube search bar and typed in Yu-Gi-Oh what's new, Yu-Gi-Oh reboot. Maybe they typed in Yu-Gi-Oh reboot or whatever, but I highly doubt they went looking for Yu-Gi-Oh content. I have a feeling it got suggested to them. And I have a feeling it got suggested to them because they play other TCGs like Magic or Pokemon, or they consume some sort of nostalgia content. And for that reason, it might have been fed in their algorithm because it also has to do with that. Like, I highly doubt that if you haven't played Yu-Gi-Oh in 10 years, you're out there looking for Yu-Gi-Oh content. Maybe you are, but I doubt it, unless you want to stay on top of things. But again, I don't think that's the case. I think that these people only found this video because of the algorithm. If you're an old school player from the Duel Monsters era or the GX era or whatever, you're probably not actively consuming Yu-Gi-Oh! So that's probably why they are often not part of the conversation. You know what I mean? Because they're not actively part of it. They're not actively searching for this type of content. It's just that occasionally it might pop up on their radar, right? It might be something that the algorithm suggested. That's what I think. I don't think that a whole lot of the 40-year-old electrician Toms are like actively watching Farfa's videos or something. I'm sure there's some of them, but I don't think there's a whole lot. Like, if you haven't been playing Yu-Gi-Oh since you were a kid, I highly doubt you're out there on YouTube searching for 2024 deck tier lists for Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Snake Eye combos or Tier Limits combos, right? I don't think those people are actively consuming and searching for this content. That's also probably why they are often not a part of the conversation, because they don't consume that. They're not a part of this world anymore. The only time that they participate is if, like the algorithm suggests it. If there's something that goes out of its way to show this to them, right? Because they wouldn't be looking for it. I think that that's a big reason why too. I say that because you end up with a skewed view that these people don't exist. Like, if you look through the comments, a lot of people are saying that this type of guy or 3 others that we looked over don't exist. There's always someone saying that, hey man, if we reboot the game, if we do all this that you're saying, these people are not even going to come back. These people are not interested in Yu-Gi-Oh! And they haven't been interested for years. There's no point in trying to cater to them or recapture them because they just grew out of the game. They're not interested. There are no returning players type of thing. So they say that guys like this, like the other 3 ones that we went over, that they're just not out there. And I'm telling you, there's a lot of people like this person. They are out there. They're just never a part of this conversation. You don't hear about them because they're not actively playing the game. They haven't played the game in like a decade or half a decade. They're not out there giving their opinions on YouTube usually. I think that that's a big component, and it's not about just getting shunned or insulted or bullied out of the conversation. It's just that it's out of sight, out of mind. You haven't played Yu-Gi-Oh! Since you were a teenager, so you don't consume the content. You're not out there looking for it type of thing. You just know that the game sucks now and it's not for you. But that doesn't mean that they're not out there. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was consumed by a lot of people. A lot of people played and liked Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a huge nostalgic thing for most people. I think that given an opportunity and setting up the environment in such a way, like a reboot, that was inviting for those people to come back, I think they would come back in droves. And once again, I use this example, we saw that with Master Duel. They came back because of Master Duel. A big chunk of those people, they just didn't stay, but they came back. A lot of people checked out the game. A lot of people were like, man, I remember this. I want to play it. I'm not surprised at all that there was this influx and wave of nostalgic people that came back to look at the game and look at what it's like right now and give it a shot, and were just discouraged and did not have fun. It's almost like all these videos that I've been doing about Yu-Gi-Oh! Here on this channel for a year, it's almost like there's some truth to that. It's because I'm not pulling it out of my ass. I know people that are in this boat. I see it constantly. Look at the metrics for Master Duel and other examples. It's obvious. Moving on, here's one comment of somebody saying that, you know, if they change the master rule of the game, that could help things already. I don't think they're necessarily wrong. I think that that's better than nothing. Second person agrees with me. They feel like the game went downhill since, you know, the synchro era, so they agree. The third one is interesting because this person clearly did not watch the fucking video before they opened their mouth, but I'm gonna address it because I think it's an important point to make. Bro, you're saying nostalgia bait is bad, but your solution is to nostalgia bait. What I'm saying is that there's not much of a point in making like the revamped Buster Blader, the revamped Gaia, the revamped Dark Magician to try to bring back those old school players, because when they come back because of that, they're going to be greeted by Snake Eye and they're not going to hang out for very long. That's what I'm saying. Versus if you do use nostalgia, if you do use the original IP and you use that as leverage to bring back a lot of these old school players that remembered the original IP, and you reboot a game that is much more similar to what they remember, if after you bring them through the door, you greet them with a game that might not be exactly the same, but it much more closely resembles what they remember, then that's a good thing. This first person agrees with me. The second person agrees with me as well. They don't like anything past the dual monsters era. They don't even like GX. The third person here basically also agrees with me. They're saying that it seems that Yu-Gi-Oh has hit every single point of no return, which again goes back to what I was saying before. It does feel like it's reached a plateau. I say that because I very much agree with this person. Yes, I do believe we've hit every single point of no return, to the point where I don't think there's anywhere to go from here. I think we've officially reached the plateau of how bad it can get. So I agree with this person. It seems that we've reached the point of no return. It seems that we're at some sort of plateau right now, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens next. So I think I've said my piece here. We could keep going, but this video is already so ridiculously long, and it's just more people agreeing or disagreeing with me or meeting somewhere in the middle. But I think I've said enough to where, you're going to start getting a lot of the same answers to the same comments. So I think this is a good point to end the video, because even if somebody made one point or another comment, something that I didn't address, which I'm sure that has been the case, by now you can probably figure out my answer to that, which might not be right, but at least for the purposes of the video, you know where I stand. Thanks for watching. Have a great week.